I still remember the day my father's body was lowered into the ground. The sky was heavy, and the air felt like it was pressing down on my chest. My mother's sobs echoed through the small crowd, and I stood frozen, unable to cry, unable to move. My father had been the pillar of our family. He worked every day on the farmland, sweating in the sun, giving us food, giving us dignity. Now he was gone, and the world felt empty. But grief did not have time to breathe. Just a week after the burial, my Uncle Samuel called a meeting in our compound. I was only 16 then, still struggling to understand what life without my father would mean. My uncle sat at the head of the gathering, his shoulders back like a man who had been waiting for this moment. "From now on," he said, his voice cold and sharp, "the farmland belongs to me. Your father owed me money. He promised that if he could not pay, the land would pass to me. And now it is mine." His words cut through me like a blade. My mother gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "That's a lie," she cried. "My husband never told me of any debt. That land is our children's future. You cannot just take it." But my uncle did not even flinch. He had already brought men with papers, documents stamped and signed, though even I, at that age, could sense something false about them. He spoke with authority, as though he had already decided the outcome. People in the village whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads, others looking away, afraid to challenge him. I wanted to shout. I wanted to stand up and fight him, but I was just a boy, and the weight of the moment crushed me. My mother's voice broke as she pleaded, but my uncle only smirked. "If you do not like it," he said, "you can leave, but the land is no longer yours." That night, I lay awake listening to my mother's quiet sobs. Our lives had changed in an instant. The land was not just soil, it was our survival. It was the food on our table, the roof over our heads, the one thing my father had worked his whole life to protect. And now, it had been stolen by the man who should have stood by us in our grief. In that darkness, I made a promise to myself. One day I would take back what was ours. One day, my uncle would see that his betrayal had not broken me. He thought he had buried us along with my father, but he had only planted a seed inside me, a fire that would not die until justice was mine. My name is Daniel, and I grew up in a small farming village where everyone knew everyone. Life was simple but hard. My father believed in discipline, in working with our hands, in building something that would last. He taught me how to plant yams, how to weed the cassava fields, how to stand tall no matter how heavy the sun burned. My mother was softer, always reminding us that kindness was more powerful than anger. Together they raised me and my younger sister, Emily, with love and strength. When my father died, it felt like the ground under us had been pulled away. I was just 16, Emily only 11. My mother carried the weight of the family, trying to protect us while dealing with her own grief. We went from being a respected family to living with shame and hunger after my Uncle Samuel took our farmland. Uncle Samuel was my father's younger brother. He had always been ambitious, but in a greedy way. While my father worked the land, Samuel worked the system. He knew how to bend rules, how to manipulate people, how to make others fear him. For as long as I could remember, my father trusted him too much. That trust was the knife Samuel used to stab us. After he took our land, my mother tried to fight back. She went to the village elders, but most of them sided with Samuel. Some were bribed, others too scared to oppose him. He had already begun renting parts of the land to outsiders, making money off the sweat of the soil my father had nurtured for decades. People whispered that maybe my father had really owed him money. Lies spread like wildfire, and soon, our family name carried a shadow. School became a challenge. I would sit in class, but my mind wandered. Some classmates mocked me, saying, "The boy whose land was taken." Emily cried often, asking me when we would get our farm back. My mother did her best, selling vegetables in the market and taking small jobs, but money was never enough. We lived in a small mud house at the edge of the village, watching Samuel grow richer while we sank deeper into poverty. Yet I refused to break. Every night, I replayed the meeting in my head, the smirk on Samuel's face, the way people looked away, the helplessness I felt. It burned inside me, and I promised myself that one day I would rise above it. I wanted to give my mother and Emily more than survival. I wanted to give them dignity again. But life was not kind. Without land, opportunities were few. I took odd jobs, carrying loads at the market, working in other people's farms, sometimes going hungry when wages didn't come. Still, I saved whatever little I could. My mother begged me to focus on school, saying education was the key, but even school fees were a struggle. I knew I had to grow up faster than others my age. By the time I turned 18, I was no longer just a boy. Hardship had shaped me. I carried anger, yes, but also determination. Deep down, I knew one truth. Samuel had stolen our land, but he could not steal my will. If I wanted justice, I would have to fight for it. And I was ready. One evening, about 2 years after my father's death, I came home from a long day of carrying loads at the market. My clothes were dusty, my feet aching, but I was used to it. As I entered the compound, I saw my mother sitting outside with her head in her hands. Emily was beside her, crying. My heart froze. Something was wrong. What happened? I asked, rushing to them. My mother lifted her face, and I could see tears streaming down. Samuel sent his men today, she whispered. They told us we must leave this house. He says it also belongs to him. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The house? The only place we had left? My father had built it with his own hands. Every wall carried his sweat. Every corner held our memories. And now Samuel wanted to take even that? They gave us 1 week, Emily cried. 1 week to leave. I felt my chest tighten. My uncle's greed had no end. Taking the farmland wasn't enough. Now he wanted to erase us completely. Rage boiled inside me. I stormed out of the compound and walked straight to Samuel's big house. He had expanded it since taking our land, painting it, adding new rooms. It looked like a palace compared to our small home. When I reached, I shouted his name. He came out, dressed in fine clothes, smelling of perfume, with a wide smile that wasn't a smile at all. "Why are you doing this?" I yelled. "You already took the land. Now you want to throw us on the street." He laughed, a loud, mocking laugh that echoed in the night. "Boy, you think life is fair? Your father was weak. He trusted too much. I am only taking what is mine. That house stands on land your father never paid for. It belongs to me now." "That's a lie," I screamed. My hands shook, and I wanted to hit him, but I held myself back. "You are destroying us. We are your family." Samuel stepped closer, his eyes cold. "Family?" he said softly, almost like a hiss. "Family means nothing when it comes to power. You should learn that. If you want to survive in this world, you must take, not beg." At that moment, something broke inside me. It was no longer just about land or a house. It was about dignity, about the life my father had sacrificed everything for. Samuel's words burned into me. If you want to survive, you must take, not beg. I walked away that night with my fists clenched and my heart pounding. I knew then that begging or pleading would never change anything. The system was against us, the elders were silent, and Samuel had power. But I had something he didn't, the will to rise. That night, I sat with my mother and Emily and told them, "We may lose this house, we may lose everything, but one day I will get it all back. Not just the farm, not just the house. I will rise so high that Samuel will regret the day he tried to destroy us." It was the first time I said it aloud. And from that day, my life took a new direction. I no longer dreamed of survival. I dreamed of revenge and of justice. The week passed quickly, and Samuel's men returned to our house with force. They didn't wait for us to move. They carried out our few belongings and threw them into the dirt. My mother begged, holding Emily close, but they pushed her aside like she was nothing. I stood there helpless, my fists tight, my teeth grinding. That day, we lost our home. We had no choice but to move into a small abandoned hut at the edge of the village, a place where even goats refused to stay. Life became harder than ever. My mother fell sick often because of the cold nights and hunger. Emily stopped smiling. She grew quiet, carrying sadness too heavy for a child. People who once greeted us in the village began to avoid us. Some said we were cursed, others whispered that Samuel had only taken what was rightfully his. Slowly, our family became isolated. I started working even longer hours. I carried cement for builders, fetched water for rich households, anything that brought a few coins. Every night, I collapsed on the floor of our hut, my body aching, but my mind restless. I hated Samuel more with each passing day, but hatred alone could not change our situation. One evening, while working on a construction site, I overheard two men talking. They were laughing about how Samuel had tricked the elders into supporting him. He had bribed them with money and drinks. The papers he showed at the family meeting were forged. My father had never owed him anything. The truth hit me like lightning. Samuel's betrayal was deeper than I thought. He had not only stolen from us, he had destroyed my father's name with lies. I went home and told my mother what I heard. She lowered her head and said, "Daniel, I knew it, but no one will believe us. The truth is nothing without power." Her words cut me deeply. I realized she was right. In our world, truth alone could not fight lies backed by money and influence. I felt trapped, powerless. As the months passed, my anger began to change me. I argued more with my mother. When she begged me to stay calm and keep faith, I snapped at her, saying faith would not bring back our land. Emily looked at me with fear sometimes, as if she no longer recognized her brother. The pain inside me was turning into poison, and it was eating away at the family I was trying to protect. The breaking point came one night when Samuel himself visited our hut. He stood at the doorway, smiling like a king, and said, "I just wanted to see how you are living now. Tell me, Daniel, do you still dream of fighting me? You should know by now you cannot win. You are nothing." I wanted to lunge at him, but my mother held me back. Samuel looked at her and said, "Tell your son to stop embarrassing himself. If he keeps challenging me, I will make life even worse for you." Then he walked away, leaving his laughter behind. That night I could not sleep. My heart was heavy with rage, but my mind was finally clear. I knew I could not fight Samuel with fists. I needed something stronger. I needed education, money, influence, the very weapons he had used against us. From that moment, I promised myself I would rise in a way no one could stop. But to do that, I had to leave the village, even if it meant leaving my mother and Emily behind for a while. It was the hardest decision of my life, but I knew if I stayed, Samuel would crush me before I even began. Years passed, and I left the village with nothing but a small bag and determination burning inside me. I worked in the city, first as a laborer, then as an apprentice in a small shop. Every coin I earned, I saved. Every insult I received, I turned into fuel. I studied at night, reading borrowed books under dim lights, pushing myself beyond limits. Slowly, my hard work paid off. I started a small business, selling building materials. It grew, and soon I had enough to hire workers of my own. I expanded into real estate, buying and selling land, learning the rules that men like Samuel had twisted against people like us. After 10 years, I was no longer the poor boy who had been thrown out of his own home. I was Daniel Matthews, a man with money, influence, and connections. But one wound still remained open: the farmland, the house, the dignity Samuel had stolen from my family. One hot afternoon, I returned to the village in a convoy of cars. The people who once ignored us now stared with wide eyes. Children ran behind, shouting my name. I went straight to the village square and called for a meeting, just as Samuel had done years ago. This time, I sat at the head, not as a broken boy, but as a man ready to take back everything. Samuel arrived late, dressed in fine clothes, confident as always. He sneered when he saw me. "So you've come back to show off your wealth," he said. "But remember, Daniel, this land is still mine." I looked him in the eye and replied, "Not anymore. I have bought every piece of land in this village, including the farmland you stole. You see, Samuel, you may have tricked the elders, but you cannot trick the law forever. I have the real documents now. This village belongs to me." Gasps filled the air. The elders turned to each other in shock. Samuel's face turned pale. He laughed nervously, trying to cover his fear. "You're bluffing," he said. I pulled out a folder of legal papers, signed and sealed by the government. "Here is the proof. You forged documents to steal from us, but I bought the village with the truth and with power you never thought I could have." The crowd erupted with murmurs. For the first time, Samuel's mask cracked. He shouted, "You can't do this to me. I am the rightful owner." Then an old man, one of the elders who had sided with Samuel years ago, stood up and confessed. "It's true. Samuel bribed us. He forged the debt papers. Daniel's father never owed him a single coin. We stayed silent out of fear, But today, I cannot hide the truth anymore. The crowd turned against Samuel instantly. Villagers shouted at him, calling him a thief and a liar. My mother, now older but still strong, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. She looked at Samuel and said, "You destroyed us when we were weak, but today justice has spoken." Samuel fell to his knees, his pride shattered. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, the same fear I had once felt as a boy standing before him. But this time the power was mine. I looked at him and said, "You taught me that to survive, I must take, not beg. You were right, but I did not take through lies and greed. I took through hard work, patience, and truth. And now, everything you stole is back in my hands." The village square was silent for a moment, then filled with cheers. Samuel's reign was over. My promise as a boy had finally been fulfilled. The days that followed were filled with change. Word spread quickly through the village and beyond. People who once looked down on my family now came to greet us with respect. They called me Chief Daniel, but I did not let the title make me forget the pain that brought me here. My first step was to restore my father's farmland. I walked the same soil that had been stolen from us, touched the trees my father planted, and felt the weight of years of injustice finally lift from my shoulders. It was ours again, not because of pity, but because of truth and strength. I rebuilt our old house. The mud walls that once crumbled were replaced with strong bricks. My mother moved back in, her face brighter than I had seen in years. She walked through the rooms with tears in her eyes, whispering prayers of thanks. Emily, now a grown woman, stood beside me smiling. "You kept your promise, Daniel," she said softly. "You gave us back everything." Her words warmed me more than any wealth I had earned. But it was not only about my family. I wanted to heal the whole village. I remembered the poverty, the hunger, the silence of those who feared men like Samuel. I invested in the people. I built a school so children could learn without worry. I repaired the market so traders could sell in safety. I gave jobs to young men and women who once wandered without hope. Slowly, the village changed from a place of whispers and fear into a place of growth and pride. As for Samuel, he tried to hold on to the scraps of his power, but the villagers no longer respected him. Without money and lies to protect him, he was just a man. He begged for forgiveness, but I knew forgiveness would not erase the scars he left on us. Still, I did not destroy him. I chose a different path. I told him, "You will live here and see every day how the people rise. That will be your punishment." My mother often reminded me not to let bitterness control my heart. First, it was hard. I wanted revenge, to see Samuel broken. But as time passed, I realized I had already won. My success, my family's healing, and the love of the people were greater victories than any revenge could give. Holding on to anger would only chain me to the past. There were quiet nights when I sat outside, looking at the stars. I thought of my father. I wished he could see what had become of his son, of his land, of his family. I imagined him smiling, telling me he was proud. Those moments gave me peace. Justice had been served, but more than that, I had grown. The boy who once shook with fear in front of Samuel was gone. In his place stood a man who knew that power without honor is nothing. Life was not perfect, and I knew challenges would come again, but I also knew I had the strength to face them. My family was safe, my people were stronger, and the land was back in the hands of those who deserved it. That was enough for me. And so, the circle was complete. From loss to betrayal, from hunger to dignity, I had walked the long road of pain and returned with hope. Not just for myself, but for everyone who once believed we were finished. One evening, I walked alone to the farmland. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The air was calm, and the fields stretched wide, just as they had when I was a boy working beside my father. I bent down, picked up a handful of soil and held it in my hands. It felt rich, alive, filled with the memories of sweat and sacrifice. For years, this soil had been a reminder of loss. Now it was a symbol of victory. I thought about the journey, the hunger, the cold nights, the shame of being called the boy whose land was taken. I thought about my mother's tears and Emily's silent prayers. I thought about Samuel's smirk and the day he threw us out. All of it rushed through me like a storm, but this time it did not bring pain. It brought strength. Behind me I heard footsteps. It was my mother, her hair now gray, her face lined with age but glowing with peace. She touched my shoulder and whispered, "Your father would be proud." Her words broke the silence of years. I looked at her and nodded, my eyes wet. We stood together watching the sun dip lower. Emily soon joined us, carrying a small basket of food. We sat under a tree, sharing a simple meal, laughing softly. It was nothing grand, nothing loud, but it was everything we had once lost: peace, family, dignity. As darkness fell, I felt a calm I had never known before. Revenge had brought me fire, but justice brought me healing. For the first time, I no longer saw myself as the boy who had been robbed. I was the man who had rebuilt, who had turned betrayal into strength. I looked at the land one last time before we walked home and whispered, "We are whole again."